I'm glad you found us over here in part 3. Hopefully I gave you a map that directed you in the right direction. That is my very smooth transition to where we're going to talk about not just pitches, but also mapping out our ideas. So we're going to take our concepts and break them down even further. For this, you'll definitely want to have access either printed or digitally to the Map It Out document. This is a 2-page document that includes space for 4 concepts for podcast. But just like we talked about in section 2, if you have more than 4 ideas, obviously you're a smart person, just print out more, right? It makes sense. The more ideas you have, potentially the better, but don't feel like you need to have a book of ideas. For the example today, we're working with just 3. I strongly recommend that you have at least 3 ideas because just because an idea is on a pitch doesn't mean it's actually going to work over here. So our main goal with this exercise is to see if we can give legs to these concepts. It's not just a cool idea for a show, but are there actually episodes that we could make about these things? And the reason that the first 5 ideas are in black and the other 2 are in blue is because it's very important that you're able to come up with at least 5 episode ideas for each concept. If you can come up with extra additional ones, even better. But if you can't come up with at least 5 episode ideas for your concept, cross it out. Doesn't mean you can never revisit it in the future, but it just means it's probably not the thing to go with right now. So I'm going to take my podcast pitch sheet and I'm going to transfer some of my ideas over here. So concept number 1 was the ska podcast. Concept number 2 was the interview creatives podcast. And concept number 3 was the camera gear podcast. So now it doesn't matter what order you go in, but you just want to come up with episode ideas. So for example, the ska podcast. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I did this not long ago as I was developing ideas for this podcast. One of the first ones was I wanted to come up with my history with ska. So I wanted to start the series letting people know how I was connected with that type of music. Then I wanted to do a breakdown of the different waves of ska, because over the years, it's a genre of music that has had different waves of popularity. I have a longtime friend who's a musician in several ska bands, so I wanted to have him on to talk about different things, so there'd be an interview with him. I also wanted to talk about ska remakes, and I also wanted to do an episode on ska cover songs, because that's a thing even from like the 1950s and 60s, ska musicians just covering songs has always been a thing. So those are kind of like my first 5 episodes that I was thinking of. I also wanted to do an episode all about the Aquabats, which is my favorite band. Not that they're strictly a ska band, but again, I came up with those ideas right now in a cheating way because I just did this as I was preparing to launch this podcast. But let's talk about then camera gear, for example. Let's look at this one. I could definitely do an episode on what gear I use. I could talk about Canon versus Sony because that's a hot topic in the camera world, and I use both camera systems, which is sort of something you don't see too often. I could talk about something that's been driving me crazy, which is Canon's marketing. I think Canon's very bad at marketing. Now we'll do interview creatives. Speaking of the Aquabats, it's one of their creative directors and founding people is Parker Jacobs, who I kind of know enough to at least ask for an interview with. He would be a really cool person to interview. He's a really cool creative person. There's also a company that I've been using for guitar and camera straps and belts. They're based out of Long Beach, California. They're a really cool company. I think they'd be really neat to talk about. In section 1, I mentioned that I have a friend who does a narrative podcast and it takes him 20 hours to produce a 1-hour episode. I would love to talk about that with him because he does not do that as a full-time job. It's a part-time thing and it's a lot of work to fit in there, and I would love to talk about that. When you're writing your episode ideas down, they don't have to go in any order. So just brainstorm and just throw the ideas down onto the paper. In my mind, as I'm going through this exercise, this has actually helped clarify some things. So the ska podcast, for example, feels like kind of a mess. There's not really, other than the genre of music, there's not really a common thread here, but these are ideas I have, and I feel like I can tell interesting stories and have fun with it. So I personally feel the most excited about this idea. The creative interview one, I have plenty of people, but there's 2 problems I'm running into, which is I don't know how many people I'm going to be able to interview, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to interview people. This is kind of a concern that I'd have with that idea, is if I'm trying to do like a weekly show, do I have to spend a lot of time recording episodes before I even begin producing and releasing it? Because now it's not just up to me, but it's up to me scheduling stuff with these people. The logistics of this are not great because the scheduling is really, really tough. The ska one is the one that just like I'm the most excited about, and I feel like I would have a lot of fun with. The camera one is interesting because I actually thought this would be the easiest idea because there's always new cameras coming out and camera news and stuff. But as I was going through here and I was thinking I could talk about my camera gear, I could talk about brands versus brand, why I think Canon's not great at marketing, the next idea that popped into my head was camera news. And when I thought about camera news, what popped into my mind was there's always something to talk about, but I don't know that I'm always going to be interested in it. And if I talk about news, the audience is going to start to expect to hear news. So every time a new thing is announced, they're going to expect like, hey, are you going to talk about it on the podcast? And I don't know that I want to be a news source. I don't want to have to do that kind of research. I'm just not that interested in that. This lesson that you're watching right now is edited down, but all of these thoughts are things that have occurred as I've sat here and kind of gone through this. So this might take you a few hours, a day or two to do. It's not necessarily going to be just as long as this video is, but I didn't want to make you sit here and watch me just think about stuff for a while. What this tells me actually is that the camera gear one, I think it has a lot of legs, but if we talked about in part one that marketable ideas aren't always the ones that are going to be sustainable, I think this would be a very marketable idea. I think me talking about camera gear could be something that works. I think, though, I might get tired of it after 4 or 5 episodes. Now, the other one, the interview creative ones, it's the logistics of it. I really want to do that, and I think that'd be really, really fun, and I think the process of me getting better at doing interviews and talking to people would be super interesting, but it's just the timeline on that that's going to be tricky, whereas the ska one, I could literally start right now, and it is the one that I just feel the most excited about, even though it's probably not the most marketable, and it does kind of feel a little vague. It's the one that I just kept coming up with ideas for. So if I had to choose one of these, I would choose that one just because it's the one that I am most excited about. And one thing to point out is that you might find yourself in a situation, and this would be a good problem to have, where you list all your ideas out, but you actually end up with 2 really good ideas that you enjoy and that you think would be great. Both of them have legs. You just had to keep writing lines for episodes and, it just kind of comes naturally. If that's the case, I would look at which one is most reasonable to start producing now. So we'll use these 2 as my examples. Both of them, I think, have legs to work. Both of them, I think, would be a lot of fun to do. I think I would learn a lot from them. However, the ska podcast is one that, even when there's research and stuff, I can do that on my own time. I can be in charge of when I'm recording because it's really just about me. I might want to do interviews every so often, but it's not every week. And so I could easily then figure out how to schedule those in advance and plan around it, because most of the episodes will be just me, and I can be in charge of my own schedule, which is, relying on yourself is oftentimes easier than relying on others when it comes to creative things like podcasts and videos and stuff. The interview one, I think I can make it work, and it's something that I've been kind of like tossing around in my mind for a while. However, like I said, the logistics of it are a little tough, and knowing what my schedule's like and how busy I am, I don't think that's the best one to do right now. So if you're in a situation like this where you're trying to decide between 2 ideas, go with the one that makes the most sense to actually start producing sooner, and then just save the other idea. Because as you run through the producible idea, you're going to build up your skills as a podcaster, and that might help make the other idea more achievable later on. Or your life, your schedule just might change later on. Maybe you do a few episodes of this and then pause it after like a season run and then jump into the other one, do a run of that, pause it, jump back to the other one. You kind of like record each one in the other's off season. That's always a possibility as well. Now, this might seem like a simple, thinking map activity, but if you spend the time to actually really try and pull ideas out, it's going to help you decide what just doesn't work, what maybe you stop being excited about halfway through your ideas. It's going to help you figure out what does work. And then after that, it's going to help you figure out which one to focus on first, because we don't want to go, okay, I'm going to produce 3 podcasts right now. Let's just focus on one. Let's do the best, most attainable idea first, and then you can evaluate in the future as time goes on. And that brings us actually to our next section. So part 4, now we're just going to talk about structuring and planning your podcast. We're going to go back to some of the things we talked about in part 1 and then wrap it up in part 4 so that you walk away with your actual plan for the first season run of your episodes.